Here. Here.
Here, everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Everyone please be seated. Okay, so the only agenda item tonight is our continued discussion and hopefully approval of town budget for this evening. So I don't think we need to have any other changes or actually approval since this was the only item. So
Yes.
we have open, and no other, the public meeting was closed last
Yes.
time, so I think now it's discussion.
Correct.
So who would like to lead? Mr. Beal or Angela?
Just relative to the worksheets that are here right now, these are the latest version of the worksheets that represent the changes that we made at the previous discussion, is that correct?
Yeah, so basically we have a column, the draft final budget, which represents basically the preliminary items that were adopted last time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I also see actual year-to-dates of November 18th on revenue
Right.
and expenses, which resulted in an increased revenue projection, I believe. Am I seeing an increased revenue projection relative to?
Some,
No,
right?
no change.
No, I'm seeing the real property tax increase, okay. Or the net numbers here, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So based on everything that's on these worksheets right now, in order for us to get to, the 2% threshold, we need to apply, how much from fund balance?
So currently, the worksheets actually are at 2%, but with an applied fund balance of 497,718.
Okay, 497.
Yeah.
All right, so we're at 497.
Right,
Just for
so
the-
we tweaked it some further to
So
bring it to that.
just for perspective, last year, we utilized about 450,000 that was already in our account.
Right,
I was trying to get us closer to that number.
right.
Now, if we were to apply 497, what would the balance of a fund balance be after that?
So the projected fund balance using the tentative would have been at 600,000 at the end of the year. So if we add 400,000 back, our projected.
So you're at $1 million.
$1 million, yes.
All right, so originally we had appropriated 823,000.
Exactly, yep.
We made the reductions during our previous discussions. We're down at like 497, something like that,
Yes.
which puts our existing fund balance closer to $1 million rather than 600,000, which I'm more comfortable with.
Just, same here, I
Right.
agree.
We talked
Yeah,
about this.
Yeah.
And then that's where we're at right now, moving forward tonight. And I know that when we do the calculation of the tax rates, we have to understand the chargeback rates are different than what our tax rate appears to be based on the calculation. How did we do this last 2 years ago? We figured out the chargeback. How is the chargeback determined?
So the county normally sends us the amount of chargebacks. So they give us two choices. Either we pay them by sending a bill, or we wait until when we have determined our own taxes and then add them back so as to determine the effective tax rate. So the chargebacks would basically increase the tax rate by some cents.
Yeah, it's like two or 3 cents. So this is where we sometimes are in the dark because we'll sit here, we'll do all the math, we'll come out to $1.94,
Yes.
right? And then the tax bills will come out and say $1.99. And we were trying to figure out how this was happening. And what happens is when the county gets everything, there's an administrative fee that they charge on top of that, which is built into the tax rate. So we were able to identify in previous years what that amount was so that we could keep our tax rate, so we know what our tax rate's gonna be. So that would be one question that I would have. You know, right now our tax rate is $1.93, all right?
Yes,
Based on the math that is in front of us right now, it's $1.94, is that correct?
yes,
All right, so we're 1 penny, okay? But my question I sent to you in an email earlier was, you know, a portion of the town was reassessed. You know, in theory, as assessments increase, tax rates should go down, right? So when we're looking at these numbers right here, are we taking into account the reassessment?
yes, we are.
We are?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, that's,
So post reassessment, we're at $1.94. I think there's a net of 3 or 4% levy or something, or 3 or 4%,
So, normally we ask the assessor to give us the average
Right.
from assessed value. So for 2019, it was 87,125,
287, 155?
125,
Okay, 125.
and for 2020, it's 297,407. So
Oh.
it has gone up by about.
So the
9,000.
average assessed single-family dwelling went up $10,000.
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'm good for now. I'm just gonna dive into this a little bit.
Frederick, you know, did you build into this what we talked about as far as the recycle yard?
No.
So one of the items that I'd like to propose, you know, for our consideration, as you know, we're facing a significant net, cost, loss, in the recycle yard. And my discussions with, Frederick, with Mike Sheehan, and others, Mike has actually committed to, through better efficiency and management, to reduce the recycle costs, $50,000 a year for the next 2 years, so we could build in a reduction of $50,000. We've discussed that preliminarily. Also, to raise, the, income basically through a combination of things, one of which would be, considering a different, fee structure with respect to some of the people that have taken advantage of it, as well as getting some additional value as a result of not having to go to Royal Carting, but instead they take care of it in managing the control. That would bring we believe, a net difference, a positive to the town of $100,000. If we were to build into that cost reduction through better management of $50,000 and an increase of $50,000, which we would then be able to discuss at a subsequent board meeting with more detail.
Well, after talking to constituents during the campaign, I'm sure you've heard this too, constituents are paying for the recycling center in their taxes,
Correct.
right? And they're also paying again when you get a permit,
Correct,
so you're getting hit twice,
correct.
and it's running in arrears.
Right, so that's why I'm
So
proposing
I-
that.
Okay, that's fine, but at one time it was free. And I know things have changed and things go up, but I think charging people twice is not fair. I don't know what the plans are going forward that Mr. Sheehan said, because they weren't shared, but that would be good to know.
Yes, we'll have further discussions on that in more detail. But, if we were to make it free, then it's going to drive the cost of the town to $400,000 that the taxpayers would have to bear.
Unless we cut some other areas.
They're not paying for it twice. If they were to pay for it, they're paying for the portion that the people who are being subsidized pay. In other words, if they were,
I'm paying for it
if
twice.
it were to subsidize itself totally, they would be $200 a person. Because they're only spending $50 for the average permit, then the taxpayer picks up the amount that the people who are using it are not paying.
Right, but I'm paying for it twice.
You're not twice, 200, not two full payments. You're paying for the
I
twice.
pay for it in my taxes.
Not all of it.
I didn't say all of it, but I'm paying for it in taxes, and I'm paying for it when I buy a permit.
Right.
That's twice.
That's not quite, that's the portion of it that's not being picked up by the
Right.
cost of it.
Exactly. I think what's going on is that the residents don't use it, are actually subsidizing the ones that actually are.
Right, and
That's
that's
what
why
it
we're
comes
Well,
down
trying
to.
to
that's
reduce
another
that
problem
cost.
too, because they're saying.
Because I don't use it, but I paid my taxes
I
for
am
it, so.
paying for something that I am not using. That's a service.
That's right.
So, and this has been going on for how long?
Long
For how
time,
many
that's why you were
administrations?
trying to change it.
Well, you gotta look at
So-
it's a philosophical thing. I mean, what services are we gonna provide? You pay for the senior center also, you don't use it. You know, you pay for the police services, you may not use that also. I mean, philosophically speaking, do we want to provide this service to our residents? And I can tell you right now that I have a number of residents that say to me, what do I get for my town
Correct.
taxes? What
I
do
have
I
that
get at
too,
all?
yeah.
What- You know, you know, we don't have a police department. You know, we don't have some of the services that other towns have because we've chosen to be true to our,
Excuse me.
you know, responsibilities of small government, right? But at the same time, this recycle program began in a different era when getting rid of refuse was a lot more affordable than it is today. There's so many DEC regulations, not to mention the resale value in China is zero. There's no resale value on electronics. Metal has gone down. So yes, we are bearing the brunt on the shoulders of everybody that lives in this town and pays taxes. So the question is, why do we do it to begin with? Number one reason why we do it to begin with is because it has shown, studies have shown that this actually cuts back on the amount of bulk that ends up on the sides of roads in municipalities.
Yep.
So it probably is time for us to have a conversation relative to, is the value still there?
Well, I think it's important environmentally that we
Yeah.
do this, and I think also as far as bulk pickup, a lot of people would like to see that come back too, and we campaigned on that too. I mean, these are services that have been in this town that people want, and maybe there's some things that we have that we don't need. That's what I'm saying. This is a service people want, from the seniors to the people that work full-time, that don't go to the rec center, that don't have children. They work full-time, they don't go to the parks because they're working. What do they have? I have a recycling center. So yes, I think it's something that we need to talk about, and I think it's something that's important for everybody that lives here.
Well, we all agree that the recycle center is important. The question is how to properly manage and utilize it.
I agree.
And that's the question. And the reason why things like bulk pickup haven't been done in the past is because, number one, we have residents paying for the recycle center. Secondly, it really has been cost prohibitive. So, you know, certainly it's something we can continue to discuss, but to act as if we haven't discussed this and try to look into it on many different occasions for many years and tried to do this and realize that based upon our budgetary constraints, we weren't able to do some of these things. That really is what's preventing us because, you know, as we always say economically, wants are limitless, but resources are limited. So,
You're right.
I mean, really what it comes down to is that we'd love to provide the residents with plenty of services, but we have to sometimes only give them the things that we can afford to give. So that's the thing we have to consider. We have to look at the cost benefit as far as what we can provide versus the cost that, to the residents that this service is going to provide, and we'll have to see what kind of equilibrium we can come up with.
I totally agree with you, but I think it is something that is very important to our residents.
Certainly is.
And there's
that's
other
why-
areas that I think that are less important that maybe should be reconsidered. And I think we should have another discussion on it, or
Well,
continue to have consultation.
Then please make your
Excuse me.
proposal, Councilwoman.
Yeah.
Well, I think we need to discuss how we can cut to.
That's
to
what we're
support
doing here.
this.
The
Right,
budget has
well,
to be passed, so please make a
I-
proposal
I-
on where to cut.
You want to go page by page?
Yeah,
That's
sure.
fine with me, let's go.
Yeah, I mean, my
Oh,
proposal is to
what was your
consider
specifically though? You-
$50,000 cost reduction.
Where?
This coming year.
From the A fund?
Yeah, you know, because that's all the, you know, recycle yard costs are in the A fund,
So just again.
other than, you know, compensation.
Very briefly, again, I'm all for the net reduction A fund, because we need it. How are we gonna make up for that now? Is that refuse disposal, or what are we, or personnel?
Combination of, you know, all those factors, you know, since we're open, you know, right now, you know, and, you know, actually over 2 days, you know, Wednesday and, you know, Saturday.
Yes.
But also better management as to what is being coming in and being, you know, placed in that site, you know, so Mike is committed to the better control of the gate and the process for dumping off materials there. You know,
Highway superintendent
number of
elect,
items.
just so we,
Yeah.
because there's two mics here, so.
Right,
The highway
right.
superintendent
Yeah,
elect.
highway super, elect.
Yes.
So 8162.4 is the refuse line, A. 8162.4,
And it would reduce also some of the royal carting,
That's
you know,
the
carting
royal.
off as well.
that's the royal disposal line, 8162.4. Based on the historical
Correct.
lines, which is 150, 128, 126, I could support a $50,000 reduction right there. Remember, we can move money within this department as the year progresses, but if we reduce that 197 to you know, 147.
Correct.
Right now,
And it brings it more in line with historical, and we eliminate some of the materials that Royal Karting's, you know, taken off because they've been, you know, taking out more containers.
I can support that right now.
So does
Frederick,
that bring,
I have a-
that bring the
Well, that reduces it.
fund balance down to 447?
Yes, that's, essentially, that's what would happen. So as we reduce here, you're taking the onus off of fund balance. That's, I think,
Correct.
you know, the object of the game here. So you'd be down from 497 to 447, which is exactly where we're at right now. That being said, the councilwoman does have some areas that she wants to entertain as well.
Frederick, did Royal Karting increase by 14% their charge in June this year? Did we put any projections about a possible increase next year?
So currently, the bill that we get from Royal Karting is about between 19 to 20,000 a month. And what we did in the tentative budget was basically to say, let's assume that we are getting right now 19,500. So over 12 months, that will be about 234,000 a year. So because Royal Karting has two lines in the budget, 8160.400 and 8162.400, we decided to apportion the cost approximately along those two lines. But this 19,500 a month that we're currently receiving a bill for, we actually did not include any additional potential charges because there were some indications that they could increase it by 14%. So that 14% is not in the budget.
It's not, right? Gentlemen?
Yeah, I have a proposal to reduce it by 50,000.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the councilwoman's point. I think that what we need to do in 2020 is continue doing our quarterly budget reviews, and if we see a trend that is going to blow the line, we need to move money. And we have the money to move it. So I'll move to accept the supervisor's recommendation of decreasing that line 8162,400 from 197,000 to 147,000.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Seeing none, the motion passed.
It's a good start. That's 50,000 right there. Where else are we going here? Want to cut the attorney? Jim, what do you think?
Do so at your own peril.
Yeah, I don't think that's a pro bono position.
Unless he's offering.
Yeah, I don't think he is.
Any other big nuts we can attack right now? If not, I have a bunch of little small ones we can just chat about.
We'll go ahead.
Okay. Just a couple of questions relative to revenues, A-Fund, pilot, payment in lieu of taxes. For some reason, this year we had $95,000 in pilot money as of November 18th. We're anticipating $20,000 next year.
It's based on some formula that is very complex, and it depends on some developments that give us, there's an agreement about the amount of money they give us in lieu of taxes. So I just want to be cautious because I really am not sure. I try to call them to give me an indication of how much we'll be getting next year, and there's no definitive answer.
Okay, so we're being extra conservative. There's a number of projects, Adams being one of them, that we get payment in lieu of taxes on. And as Frederick said, the formula is not necessarily a simple formula, so it's better to be conservative on the pilot line, is that what you're saying, than to
Right.
base it on a year to year. So I have no problem with that, 20,000. We may get more, chances are we're gonna get more based on the history, so we'll just keep it at 20,000 then. Rental of real property, which is 2410.0A. Is that the rent coming in for the emergency services building?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Cell site revenue, where does that come in? I mentioned this at the last meeting. Cell tower revenue, is that coming in on a specific line, or?
That should be under the rental of real property 2410.
Is it 2410?
Yes.
Oh, that comes in on that line also?
Yes.
I would just be curious, not right now, but down the road, show us a breakout of where we're at. I know there's two separate agreements, you know, one having to do with this cell site right here, which is the better agreement, right?
Right, because we get some profit,
Right.
off of that.
The other one is out on Regency. At some point, a spreadsheet, just so we can see where they're at. You know, this town has, those are the only two cell sites, right?
I believe that's correct.
What about the one over by Rockingham? Did we get anything?
Well, that's
from
the Regents, when he
Oh,
goes
That's the
Regents.
Regents.
Oh,
to
okay.
soccer,
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
actually Soccerfield Drive is
Right.
the,
That's the new one.
is the
So,
one.
so we have one on the west side of town and one on the east side of town, which I think is good.
We still don't have anything built in here, Bill, because we have not heard from Verizon with respect to their arrangement. We recall we got Optimum Altice
Oh.
you done last year, but that
Yeah.
particular contract
Franchise,
is,
okay.
and Jim was gonna look into that further.
Yeah, I have to, Verizon's been very squirrely with a
Right.
lot of municipalities, not just,
Well,
they haven't been singling out us.
They just shut down their entire news operation with no
Right.
notice the other day,
Correct.
so it is what it is.
So we have nothing in here, for that at this time.
Mortgage tax revenue, which is 3005.0A. I just wanted to take a look at where we're at here on the latest projections. All right, we're still anticipating 450,000.
Projected down,
Yeah, we're projection, it doesn't help that our year-to-date is so low,
right,
and you know how that comes in all
but
the
it
last
comes in
time.
all at once at the
Yeah.
end.
So we're being very conservative on that, and for folks that may be watching on television, we have a history of being conservative on revenues for a reason, and that's why sometimes we have a lot of fund balance, because the revenues come in over projection, which is not a bad thing. We're also got the AIM in there, state
Correct.
revenue sharing. Have we heard anything from Albany on
No.
that?
I don't
So
think
Dead
that
silent.
comes in till December,
Uh,
correct?
that, well, that would be the CHIPS, right? CHIPS comes in
No,
December?
No.
Chips is on the highway side.
Okay.
AIM is,
What comes in December? Is it AIM that comes in
Well,
December?
it used to come in September, but this year there was some uncertainty.
yeah,
But they
AIM
did
is,
confirm that they will give us the money in December for 2019. Now, for 2020,
Yeah, we know.
And you recall the issue,
Don't
Bill,
have
is
it.
that we're a town with a village, and so there could be impact.
Oh,
on our
right,
aid,
that's what it
right?
was.
That's the big issue.
So, okay, there's nothing we can do about that
No.
tonight, but the state is now redrawing the formula, which is basically gonna be a sales tax net formula for AIM, which is gonna affect us because that's B fund revenue, because we have a village.
Right.
So it won't be A fund revenue, so we have enough fund balance to cover that. If that happens, we'll be actually plus on the B side. So, we'll just have to handle it.
But I'm raising it at the Dutchess County
Supervisor.
Supervisors and Mayors
Because they,
at our next
when you bring
meeting.
that up, most of them are not even gonna know what you're talking
No,
about.
that's right. Yep,
But that's something we need to keep our eye on.
we will.
Moving on to, okay. The town board equipment line was taken out,
What page are you on?
which is, I'm sorry, it's 1010.200A.
16.
Thank you.
I just wanted to put $1,000 back in there, just so we, in case something breaks, we can, the town board equipment line, it's $1,000. I'll move that we put $1,000 into that line.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? The motion passed.
And that,
record each vote here on every one?
I don't think you need to.
No, I think,
We're just doing that just for our own.
yes.
1010.200A, that is. Okay, sorry, Joey, but the 1010.202A, the town historian equipment line, was 300, went to 1,000 at one point. You still, oh, you're getting a new computer? Why is $1,000 in there? Better have a good answer real quick.
Because I think there was 1,000 in there, there's adopted 2019, there was $1,000.
464 was only spent.
You only spent $300,
Yeah, so
and you spent $265 the year before that. Is there a need for $1,000, or can we trim it back to 300?
well, we had talked about potential historical plaques and things like that, and we purchased some items. It's up to the town.
Well, plaques, they can wait, I guess.
Well, I don't,
Let them
I'm not
see.
gonna, listen,
I don't know.
we did talk about buying a plaque for
Yep.
a a location, one of those, not bronze, but
So
the
the cash.
historical plaques. So I think that justifies keeping the money in here, because the historical plaques that are the ones that are like the blue and gold on the side of the road.
Yep.
And I've outlined a couple of other.
All right, okay, that's a good argument. I'm just trying to be deliberative here.
Okay.
Town board contingency was taken out. I think it's good to have some contingency in there for the purposes of things that may come up during the year. Previously, we had put more money in there than we needed. We haven't spent money in that line, but it was kind of a placeholder if we needed funding for something. I would like to put 5,000 back into that line. We had 10,000 last year and spent 0, but I'd like to at least earmark 5,000 into that line, because those plaques that we're talking about are about $1,200. If we gotta borrow some money, I'd rather keep it within the same department. I'll move that we put 5,000 in that line, 10-10-405A.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nays, abstentions, seeing none, passes.
Now, just to clarify on the employees, there are union obligations for raises, is that correct? My question is, all of these employees have been given a certain percentage of a raise here as we get into the employees?
We have built in 2%.
Okay,
The
so,
union is demanding more, and Chris and I have,
so
so far
2%,
negotiated
we're out of
that.
contract, right? Is that what's going on?
Yes.
Contract goes to the end of the year, so we'll
Okay, all right.
negotiate a new
So at
contract.
this point, we're putting 2% in good faith, for the employees. So I don't have an issue with that. The only issue I do have is that we talked about elected officials last meeting. I was told there would be no changes in elected official salaries. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Because the town justices are reflecting a raise.
That was discussed at the last meeting and voted on, I believe.
Well, we had to post the salaries prior to the election. That was the only thing.
So the town justice salaries don't get posted.
Okay.
They're not covered by that provision.
So they weren't part of the posting?
Correct. Right.
Interesting.
It's the town clerk, board members, highway super, town supervisor.
So
No and no deputies.
my concern with the court, and I just came from a meeting where they're talking about bail reform and all that morass, is that in fact, revenues will go down, costs are going to be going up. And, just like with the rest of us, I'm not sure what really justifies the increase, raise unless the courts are being mandated for some raise. I'm not aware of that though, are you?
No, it's just,
I agree with you 100%.
Well, we adopted 31,465 in 2019. We have 32,094 as the recommended 2020. It's up to the town board to decide on those positions.
Right now, year-to-date is 27, and so that will come out, Frederick, to the 31,465 by the end of the year.
Yes.
So do we keep it at 31,465?
I'd say, right now, yes.
All right, move to keep the salaries of the town justices at 31,465.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Nays or abstentions? Motion passed.
Obviously, the other folks that are listed there are all employees that are receiving whatever the
Whatever the
recommended
union.
formula
The union.
is.
Correct.
So there's nothing we can do there.
When I put my budget together, I was told to hold off on adding any raise pending the union contract.
No,
So-
2%, you were told to build it.
I
Everybody
believe,
else is
I think
building
your lines,
2%.
I looked at your lines, I think,
It shows it all the same all the way.
Because I think Frederick
I thought
automatically went in and increased it. Yeah. did
Yeah, I
others.
did- I did
Steve,
based
yours
on-
was
yeah.
2% increase, right?
Yeah,
It's in there as
Yeah.
2%?
yes.
I thought he built it in on the worksheets we received, it was consistent on all the employees.
Okay, perfect,
Yes.
sorry. I
So
just-
whatever your recommendations were adjusted.
Okay, just making sure. I
Yes.
Do not want to overlook anything for them.
I had a question relative to Comptroller Department 1315-101A, 1315-101A. I know there has been a change of duties I wasn't sure what the school of thought was on that line. There's a year-to-date of $13,244, and then a recommended salary of $40,841. I was a little confused on that.
So basically that is based on the pay rate. As if you can remember, the account clerk typist was hired in April, so the year-to-date would not be as much compared to if she was should work from the beginning of the year. So basically, that is the pay rate that she was hired at for 35 hours a week for 52 weeks and add 2%.
So the adopted salary was $36,400, and then the 2020 salary, $40,841, that's more than 2%, right?
Yeah, because of the pay rate.
The pay rate?
I think they adopted her at $20 an hour, but when she was hired, she was given $22 an hour.
All right, we may have to take this one offline and just leave it alone for now and discuss in executive session relative to understanding fully how that pay rate formula was created. So I'll leave it right there for now, but I just had a question on that one. Under your, you're gonna refresh my memory on this, 1315.200, you had a $51,000 expenditure on equipment. What was that for? I remember we had this discussion.
The financial software package,
Financial software.
All right.
Edmunds.
It still hurts, sorry.
but it's doing a.
Is it
big
working?
job. Yes,
Yeah.
very
Do we
well.
have a lot
Now,
of support?
is there a maintenance fee that is the licensing fee? Is that budgeted
1320.
in there?
Yes, it's budgeted in
It's
there.
1320.
1,320.
That's cheap.
Well, you know what happens when we say how cheap they are, the following year it jumps up. So, all right, so that was a one-time expense, and then the annual support is $1,320. Are we locked into a contract where it's gonna stay that rate for X number of years?
Well, the annual maintenance is about $4,000. It usually increases by, maybe 2%.
So how is it 1320 budgeted then if it's $4,000?
1320 is actually not the software line, that is the auditor's line. Auditing, or the independent auditor, the CPA,
Okay,
yeah. So the line for the software would be 1315. 406.
I see it, okay, that's
So
fine.
we left it the way it is because
Yeah, just
the
leave it.
license or maintenance for 2020 would come under that, so.
Do you know what the typical life of accounting software for municipalities is, by any chance?
No.
Municipalities tend to keep it 3 times longer than they should.
That's what we did with KPS.
And then what happens is everything gets messed up.
Right.
And
I was just wondering if you're looking at
That's
a
it.
4 to 5 year or a 10-year.
Maybe 5,
Okay. All right.
maybe
When did we get KVF?
209.
09, 10 years
okay.
ago. Yeah.
also keep in mind they went bankrupt.
Yeah. And they're an accounting company. They went bankrupt. That tells you they weren't using their software right. Paychecks time in a box is always another one that gives me chest pains. I'm just hoping that everything is working properly
It
at
is.
that number.
It is.
Okay, good. I think.
I tell you
I
what,
think that if they're able to convince the union to do bi-weekly,
Oh, yeah, that's the key.
That's one thing, and
the
also
subscription
instead
will
of
go
doing
down from
paper,
19 to
Right.
13.
why are we doing paper checks? And why is it not electronic? And if they have to do paper, why aren't they being
has to be in the
charged?
it has to be in the collective bargaining agreement.
Right, so the county.
Labor law provides that manual laborers must be paid weekly unless unless you're a municipality and it's in a collective bargaining agreement.
I don't want to
Okay.
discuss that here,
Right.
our negotiations,
That's
we
fine,
can
but
discuss that
that's
separately.
something,
No,
you know,
I'm-
also-
we're aware.
Paper is passé, checks, hard copy, I mean, that's part
Tell
of the contract.
tell that to the New York State Department of Labor.
Well, I can tell you that, full disclosure, I am a CSEA member for the county, and in the last contract, they negotiated in the contract, everyone has to have
Direct
direct
deposit.
deposit.
Yeah.
There was no option.
I agree.
You
And in
can have
fact,
direct- But that's good, direct deposit's fine, but you're still getting a paper paycheck.
Right, and we don't have
which we
paper at
should-
all.
We should not be doing that at all.
I agree.
That's very passive.
we agree.
There's money that could be,
Listen, Joe, we had this debate years ago. We did go paperless for about a week.
I mean, that's.
We can explore that again. I think
Yeah,
PDFs just came out when we did that. It was, we couldn't find anything. Nobody knew where anything was. All right, so, okay,
Or maybe because we
paycheck.
got the monitors, it might be easy. We'll
Just
get you
for
all
the-
monitor up there.
Oh, please, just for the record, Frederick did point out that it could be a $6,000 net savings if we went to bi-weekly over weekly.
Actually, 7.
Yep.
$6,000 or $7,000.
Seven.
So that would be a little bit easier. Hopefully that can happen at some point.
Yeah, one union has agreed to it, the other hasn't,
Okay.
so far.
We'll get there. Line number, tax clerk, line number 1330.102A. In 2019, we were 18,200. This year, we're at 36,400. Is that part-time to full-time, or?
Yes, so the proposal is for $20 per hour for full-time, and it used to be part-time. So $20 times
1820.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so that's a full-time position in the tax receiver's office, or?
Tax receivers office.
Okay. All right, everybody's good with that? That's a new full-time position, right?
Yes,
In
you know,
those-
because we've had a part-time,
Right.
and, you know, we can discuss more of that offline.
Okay, so
Yeah, I mean, in executive
I don't have an
session.
objection, because I remember we've had these
Right.
discussions
You're right.
before. All right. Under the Assessors Department, 1355-101A, there is a line that says Deputy Assessor. Oh, that's, okay, I know who that is now. Okay, I wasn't sure who that was. All right, that's fine.
Actually, the one above it.
Yeah, what's that why is the actual so far off?
So the proposal in the tentative was at 51,400 for the town and 51,400 for the town of Fishkill. So that was a total of 102,800. But we are actually paying 104 or 52,000.
Because originally, we believed that Fishkill had agreed to that, then they reneged.
Yeah.
They've since back to 104 after the board, but we had to pick up the balance.
So it was a $2,000
Yeah,
difference? Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so the
That's
reason
what
why
it
it's 46,400 is because 5,000 comes from the water and sewer. So I think we need to add 600 to the 46,400 to make it 47,000.
So add $600, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so
Now, how do we get the money out of water and sewer back into the A fund?
Because we have budgeted for it in there.
Can budget a transfer.
So years ago, when we went through some economic challenges, we had to look at how some of these positions could be subsidized by special district. And this is one of them that was that way. So are we still paying 50% of this? In other words, we're not paying, because it says year-to-date 61,375.
Yeah, because we pay 100%,
Oh, and then we have to
Yeah,
charge
they-
them back.
They cut us a check.
so we already got the 50%.
That is so confusing.
Up to June.
Let's make sure our ducks in a row here going into the end of this year, since there's a new administration in town of Fishkill.
Yeah.
Make sure they understand the process. So we're good there. And
They do, and they recently had
They
their board
approved the
reviewed
cap.
it and approved.
I saw the letter. Yeah, they confirmed it in that letter. So you want to go to 47 flat then on that line? So I'll move that we're going to increase the assessor line 1355.100A. We're going to increase it by $600. So it goes to 47,000 flat.
I'll second.
Aye?
Yes, all in favor?
Aye.
Any nays and abstentions, motion passes.
All right, that cleans that up.
There's one item, related to that, 1355, I'd like to discuss in executive session.
Sure.
When we talk about some other personnel issues.
Sure. Down to town clerk, town clerk, deputy town clerk number 2, 1410.103A. I'm not seeing it.
103A?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
I'm not seeing any actuals on that line for some reason. Yeah, for some reason, there's no actuals on that line.
So the actuals were actually recorded in 104,
Oh, I see that now.
so that's why,
So, moving forward, it's gonna just stay on, it's gonna stay on, the 103 line as we move forward? Because it's being billed to the 104 line.
And nothing in 104 then?
Yeah.
so we can decide to move it to 103 to be in line with the,
Yeah, just so that in future years it makes sense, because right now the actual is on a different line. All right,
so it's gonna be 103, we can
Just-
adjustment.
these are just housekeeping things. General code, which is 1410-414A, general code codification. Oh, okay, I think we're good. We're good on that. It's $9,000. The year before was 11,000. It all depends on how many local laws there are. Yeah. And then this year we're 2,000. We should be okay this year. So yeah, you can't really tell. All right, that's good. Right. A14, the town attorney, A Fund 1420-400. I think we might have talked about this one already.
Yeah,
We
you had
did.
proposed a
Okay, that's
reduction
done, that's
before.
done, that's good. I had a question on 1480.4A, which is probably a printing expense or something like that. It was a $48,000 or $46,000 expense.
So
Public-
that is actually the Mike Minor,
Oh, that's the public broadcast.
so we have there 3,500 per month for 12 months.
Okay. I wasn't sure what that was. Is that the right line to be putting it in?
Yeah, 1480. It's public information and services.
Okay, I just didn't know what it was. That's fine.
Now, do we have the equipment billed out, we have the equipment billed out separately?
Yeah, that's the cell.
Okay.
I did it free for 6 years.
Well, I think they did buy the equipment this
But
year.
you're so
we-
generous.
You're a good employee.
Somehow we're at 57,000 on the actual there. Is that because equipment was built into that line?
No,
So if it's $3,500 a month, then how'd the actual get to 56,977?
I believe there are other programs that he was taping that
Okay.
weren't part of his contract.
All right, so we just gotta keep our eye on the
Yeah.
ball, that's all. I don't have a problem with the 42,000. I think we got a rhythm going now, I think, which is good. When we first got up and running, we had to catch up a little bit. All right, I don't have an issue with that.
just also to mention, we did have the equipment cost, but it was posted on the B fund. If you look at the B 1480.200,
Okay.
we have.
That was
40
paid out of PEG grant.
Yes,
Right,
for
correct.
the 2,000.
But that comes back in through, does that come back in?
Well, that was a one-time
One time.
payment from Cablevision for PEG.
Did they pay already, or are we still waiting for their approval at the state level?
We're waiting for the approval. They submitted to Public Service
Correct.
Commission.
And I
haven't
think they
seen-
said by the end of the year. There hasn't been anything in
Yeah, I
yet.
haven't seen anything come back from them, but they had requested something, a copy of the resolution of approval, I believe
Correct.
it was.
Yes, so we're still waiting for the approval
Right.
before they cut the check.
So we laid the money out, we'll get it back.
Right.
Right.
All right, whatever, that's B fund anyway. We have a lot more money to play with in the B fund. All right, over to central data processing, I always forget what this is, 1680.400A.
So basically, that is the IT consultant.
That's our IT services?
Yes, IT
Okay.
services, server.
Okay.
So year to date, 36.
So we're going up $4,000 in that?
It's in there, it's 1680.400, it's in the budget already for 40,000. We've only spent 28,000 this year, but they keep it at 40,000 usually for IT services. Doesn't mean we spend it all, it's just there for,
But maybe we should look at adjusting that?
if you'd like to, we had
Yes, I would.
30,000 previously.
I'd like to keep it at 30,000.
So right now it's at 36,000.
36, actual.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at old numbers here, hold on.
It's online.
It's 36 actual right now.
36,
Almost 37.
7, yeah.
Almost 37 actual,
I think we should just keep it at that,
yeah.
please.
We still have a year and a month to go,
Yeah.
and they're upgrading security.
All right,
They're
yeah.
upgrading what? I'm sorry.
Upgrading the security of our system based on our
Excuse
state
me.
controller's recommendation.
So obviously, again, you know, we're seeing increases in unallocated insurance, which is what we normally see. We didn't build any payroll contingencies in here. I don't know if we need to at this point, to be honest with you, because we have fund balance available, and I think we're budgeting on target.
And what was payroll contingency before, Bill? When you budgeted?
Well, if we anticipated an increase in a union obligation, we would put some contingency in, but because you built in the 2% into the next fiscal year, I don't think it's necessary to do that at this point.
This isn't much, but looking at the Association of Towns, it was 6,826, am I correct?
That
And it
was
went
for-
up,
That was for 2019.
right, and it went
Which
up
line is
200.
that?
This
Oop, I'm
is
sorry.
1990-500-A.
We budget about 7,000 each year for that, and we came in under budget at, you know, just barely under budget this year.
Yeah, the
Well, maybe
total,
we should look at that, too.
That's A fund, though. That's just the A fund personnel, correct?
yeah, so basically this is the line that is used by the town board members. All the other departments budget for their own association of towns, registration and you know, accommodation, and their own departments.
So this
So
is only for
highway-
the
So
town
this is
board?
basically just the town board,
Just the town board?
yes,
And all other departments budget
Through
in
the-
their own
separately
lines.
through their own?
Yes,
And highway and courts are through their own?
oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been, I mean, going back for 5+ years, we're around 7,000. I mean, it hasn't
That's a net.
changed.
Yeah.
Even though the venue changed, we've been able to keep it down, which I think is time well spent. Traffic control, 3310.400A. This is the traffic light, or it used to be the traffic light down the street that I thought the county took over.
There was an agreement for that, to that effect. I don't,
Yeah, but are we still paying the bill here?
Looks like we're paying something.
Maybe they're doing the maintenance and we're paying the electric bill? I don't know.
you can look at that.
Well,
Frederick, do you know how that works? That,
Yeah, I'll have to check.
did we just look into
Traffic
that?
control, public safety.
It's just one traffic light that we pay for.
Because we swapped Old All Angels.
No, we're talking about Sergeant Palmetier and
No,
Middlebush.
we swapped, that was the agreement. They picked up the traffic light, and then we got Old All Angels.
Yeah.
So there was an agreement.
So maybe they picked up the actual tangible traffic light to repair, but I think we're still paying
Well, we'll check into it.
the electric bill,
See what-
which is, I mean, it's not a big deal.
No, but it adds up, right?
Yeah. well, it's-
Good luck. A Fund 5010402A, which is trainings. Trainings, wasn't really sure what that was. It's A Fund Highway. A Fund Highway Training, so, okay, so whatever.
So that'd be the highway super.
Highway
Yes,
Superintendent
yeah,
Training, okay, I
yeah.
just wasn't sure what it was. Underneath that is the highway office rental, which year-to-date is almost $10,000. It's probably over that on the new numbers here. My question is, how long is the lease that we're obligated to be in for that trailer?
It's at a
2 years.
2 year, I believe, 2 years.
Can we get out of it?
We can look into that.
Costs us $10,000 for something that has not been used.
That's right.
So if we can look at that, and I would agree with the supervisor not to budget that line until we can figure out what's going on.
And as we look at other options as well, so.
The other thing was, did we make a change to 5132.401A? I think we might have made a change to that, 5132, yeah, we did, okay, we already did that. We reduced that down to 50,000, which is appropriate. Down to Recreation Committee 7020.1, 7020.1,
That's meaning 100-A or?
correct.
Okay.
I would like to refund that line to what we did in 2019.
Oh, 16,000?
Correct.
I'll second it.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Nays or abstentions? Motion passed.
All right, this is where we had a little bit of change in the 7020 section. And we're gonna have to have a little bit of discussion here, I think, just to make sure we're on the same page. We zeroed out the event coordinator and the park attendant lines so that we could have further discussion about what direction we want to go in 2020. Previously, we had put a line in for Parks and Recreation Director of 60,000. Jessica ended up splitting the numbers up and coming up with 2 more positions there. During preliminary budget discussions, my recommendation was to zero them out so we can get on the same page and discuss where we want to go, and that's where we're at right now.
I think we need to discuss that in executive session.
Oh, okay.
I think because there's personnel issues.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so right now.
We'll come back and discuss it further.
Okay. I'll yield to the board on that. And I'll just make a mark here that we need to come back to that because we have to have some sort of,
Right.
in my opinion, we need to earmark an amount of money there somewhere. Then down to Buildings and Grounds, 7110.100A. Actually, not A. Moving down, Steve, I'm glad you're here because we need some clarification. I need some clarification. And I apologize that this is the night I was at the Eagle Scout Board of Review, so I wasn't here for your presentation, but you and I have spoken. When we look at these lines, some of them have names connected to them, some of them don't. I'm seeing 7110.110A, Steve Hickman, full-time. Is he currently full-time?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's, hang on, that's staying. Then 7110.111A is Pete Riccoboni. Is he currently full-time?
Correct.
He is, okay, so that's the same. 7110.112A, Stephen Lewis, Stephen Lewis,
Drop that down.
Here, do you need, you want to look at this, Steve? Would that help? Can you look on to me?
so Stephen Lewis, is he currently full-time?
Yes.
Okay, so that stays the same. I'm just trying to figure out where the changes are. I believe the next one's a change proposed. 7110.113A, James McCarthy. This is a part-time going to full-time, is that
That
correct?
was a seasonal employee that I wanted to make year-round.
And he's been doing a good job.
Okay, so that's one seasonal proposed to go to full-time. The next one is 7110.114A, Joseph Velders. Is that also a seasonal?
Same
full-time?
situation, yes.
Same situation, okay.
And Sal is full.
Sal is already full, is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's
he
your
is
skilled
the,
labor?
Skilled labor,
Okay.
yes.
He's doing an outstanding job as well as the others. Actually, his skills are exceptional.
Now, the line below that, 118A, you had proposed an additional skilled laborer. I think I had proposed to zero that out for the time being. That's the 45,000. Yes, it is zeroed out right now. So we put that one on hold. Okay, there's no one in that position, correct?
Correct.
Okay, just
And
want
what
to
was your intention for that, Steve?
Well, because we've had, the list of things that need to get done, and what we've been able to accomplish with the one skilled labor will be, hopefully be able to double with a second one and possibly start getting caught up on these things that need to get done.
Okay. Understand the need. Tom Johnston's 120A, he's currently seasonal, is that correct?
And remaining so.
Remaining. Then you're asking for one additional seasonal, 121A?
Right, and that is an existing position without an assigned employee.
All right, that one is currently zeroed out also.
What
So-
I did, I had, this past year and years past, I had 4 seasonal employees. I cut that back to 2 seasonal and, so we wouldn't take such a big hit on a full-time year-round employee. You'd only have to come up with half the amount rather than all of it.
Now, how does it work when a seasonal employee is done with the season? Are they eligible for unemployment?
Depending on how many weeks they worked, yes.
Because I know that we've had this discussion before where we were trying to alter the seasonal employees so that they would not work more than the time that triggers unemployment.
That only works if they have not worked anywhere previous to coming here.
We got into civil service and looking extensively at that to understand it. And I think some of the practices we had before, we've rectified some of
Okay.
that.
So right now, the question at hand is, are we in a position to entertain a full-time skilled labor addition and a seasonal addition? That's the
Well,
question.
the seasonal's not addition. That's existing, or had been. It just, I put new there because it would be a new employee, it's not a new position.
Well, if your previous seasonals are going to full-time,
2 out of 4. And that plus Tom Johnson are the remaining 2 that, had been existing.
So how much has your head count increased in parks and
In
from the
what time
beginning of the year?
period?
For this year?
For this year, 1.
Yes, only one person.
Correct. When I started this job, I had 12 employees. I have 7 currently.
Yeah, things change, Steve.
Yeah, I understand that, I'm just,
Okay.
but the workload hasn't. It's, if anything, it's increased.
I understand, but a lot of places have to do more with less, unfortunately, and that's the public and the private sector. And that's what we're trying to do.
so through the preliminary discussions, we zeroed out, I should say, the 45,000 for the additional skilled labor, and we also zeroed out the quote-unquote new seasonal 2475. Correct. So, it's 65,475 is what the total is for those 2 positions, if we're gonna add it back. Or 1 or 2. I mean, I'll be honest with you, at this point, I'd feel more comfortable putting the seasonal back at 20,475, leaving the 45,000 unfilled at this point, so that we can get into the year and see where the revenues are gonna be after the first quarter.
I agree with you.
That's fine with me.
Because, I mean, we're coming
Yeah.
into,
We have
I mean,
a lot of, work that
That
has to
option
be
is
done.
better than not having that option at all.
I'd also like to see the difference between what we're contracting out versus what we could do in-house and the savings there.
I can tell you that it averages at minimum a quarter of the cost of what we have to contract jobs out at. Because anything that we contract out has to be done at prevailing wages. And many times, we get a deep discount on materials that the contractors either don't get or don't pass on to us when they do the jobs. So, it's a significant difference in the amount of work that I can get done with the money that I have to use.
And Steve's been bringing in some very capable and electrical, plumbing, and other areas, but he didn't.
I'll give you an example, and I'm very grateful for the purchase of that mini excavator we got last year. I paid for that expense came back to us in the amount of work we did in 3 months with that machine. It's just, we get this stuff at a reduced rate to start with, and then we're not paying the contractor rate on the equipment, and not, not only equipment, then I need the manpower to run the stuff. And, it does come back to us. It's an expense up front, but we get it back at the end of the year.
Plus, I'm assuming it could conceivably be done quicker because you don't have to.
Exactly. We're not on a contractor schedule. It's our own.
so last year was the first year that you were able to hire a skilled laborer for 45,000, is that correct?
Correct.
All
About
right.
2 or 3 months into the year, yeah.
All right, so what I'd like to do is wait 2 to 3 months in 2020 and revisit that for the second skilled laborer. I'll move right now to reinstate the 20,475 at line 7110.121A for the seasonal, but I'd like to keep that skilled labor zeroed out for now until we can get into the year and see what's going on.
I second that.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nays or abstentions? Motion passes.
You got that,
I
right?
would agree with that, but let's look at it as needed. If all these items need to be repaired and we're looking at, $100,000 in contractor costs,
I agree.
you know what I'm saying? I'm just saying right now, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
But if the need arises, can we leave that open?
Of course.
Yeah, I
Well,
think
that's what
that's
he
what
said, for
we
the
have,
the first 3 months of next year. We'll address it.
We have
if
fund balance.
needed.
My only concern, and I think the supervisor shares this, is once we start getting into the mud in 2020, it's a presidential election year, there could be revenue issues, which can happen anytime. But I think we're being extra cautious now, just
Correct.
based on the political and
Right.
economic environment.
And I've discussed that with Steve, and, he's fully in agreement with that approach we talked
Well, you
today.
also sent us this
Yeah, no,
wonderful
no,
memo
I'm-
that came to all of us, how the
I'm
environment.
concerned with respect to those things.
It's very important.
Thank you.
Okay, Steve, thanks.
We already reduced the other recreation, or building and grounds.
Steve, just
Excuse
one
me.
other thing, and again, I think it's in the same, along the same line that Bill mentioned. Same thing with equipment. I think you had mentioned before there was still some other equipment that we weren't looking at this time, but with the idea, I think, Bill, that when we come back into early next year, probably the spring, then we'll revisit that based on those
Right,
needs.
the dump truck that we use for snow
Right.
plowing here is gonna need to be replaced.
But
And I estimate that around 70,000.
And along with that, though, what I'm discussing, Chris and I are actually discussing with the union, is that we share more.
I agree.
You know, with it, and I think everybody's in agreement with that, that we do, you know, more of that instead of, you know, a silo here and a silo there.
I agree. We already.
Thanks, Steve.
We already discussed the recycle center at this point, right?
Right.
Just to that point, though, one of the things that you have to be cautious of, as far as, you know, doing work with highway personnel for, in essence, A-fund buildings, there should be, you know, compensation from the A-fund to the highway fund for labor expenses associated with that.
Now, you know, I think part of, too, what we're looking at is with respect to Steve's building and grounds, how we better manage
Yeah.
that as well. And one of the items with the contract negotiation is taking it up to the 40-hour week. So I
Yeah.
think we'll be
Okay.
coming back to that, but we are cognizant of
And
those
then
issues.
the other thing too, from a budget, you know,
Right.
is also on the highway side. You know, there's a potential, I think, to charge back certain highway labor to the special district maintenance, so.
Thank you.
When you look at hospital and health insurance, you're seeing like a 15% increase again, something like that? I mean, it's crazy. We're doing.
We seem to be doing better than other municipalities, and I think it's 10 to 12, you know, that area, some are seeing a much bigger jump on it, so
Yeah.
our plan's been managed better. Part of it is the way that we've been managing claims, you know, reducing that, so that, in fact, workers' comp and other, you know, elements have been down. Part of it I attribute to the training, you know, you mentioned earlier training, but I think Highway Department as well as Steve has been sending more folks to training, so that seems to be working better.
That's good. Over to B Fund, looking at 1120.0-B, sales tax revenue.
Before we go to B, there was a bit of also additional house cleaning on the A fund. The assessor equipment, according to the IT, they need 3 computers, which they are not factored into the budget.
Are these new? Okay, these are new changes?
So A 1355.200 assessor equipment, if possible, to increase it by 1980.
And that
is
was for another computer, correct?
for 3 new computers in their department.
Oh, it's 0, so you're going to 1980?
Yeah.
I'll
Yes,
move
yes.
that we appropriate $2,000.
Okay.
Second.
Yeah, all in favor? Aye. Nays or abstentions, motion passed.
Building and grounds, A 7110.100. I think these are just minor rounding, maybe we can leave them out. We currently have the HVAC upgrades going on.
The what, Frederick, I'm sorry?
The HVAC
HVAC work.
Oh, HVAC.
upgrade going on currently. And if you remember, the town would have approved a bond of about 1.3 million. So we had actually not gone out to get this bond. So we are thinking of issuing a bond at special note to come due around July. If we do that, we need to pay at least an interest amount on it.
That's for the HVAC work?
Yes.
What's the debt service going to be on that? Do you know?
The interest, about 25,000.
That's not in here now?
No,
That's what he is on this separate sheet.
because originally we were thinking of,
Oh, it's a ban?
Yeah, ban.
Oh,
So that would be A 9730.700 bond interest, 25,000.
Okay, we have to put this, it's not an option, we gotta put it in.
Yeah.
So you just issue a ban and then go to permanent financing.
Correct.
Well,
subsequent
we'll
year.
see, maybe we'll add to other,
Yeah, we're looking at some other capital
Yeah.
expenses and
Yeah.
things, so that's the idea, Bill, it's temporary. Build over to that point.
All right,
Steve, by the way, just so the board knows, what's the status with respect to the HVAC work? And I know you've been on them and making sure that the contract date and so forth.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're doing the best they can. I believe that there's been a delay in some of the materials or product that is not gonna get delivered quite on time, but I haven't been able to confirm that. It's just a rumor.
But everything else, all the
Everything else is on
lines that
schedule,
they've been
yeah.
putting in.
We have weekly meetings or bi-weekly meetings to see where we're at and where we project to be going. And to this point, everything's been on schedule. I did get an email about, it's a flexible link that is a special item, and that is not supposed to be delivered on time and may cause a slight delay. But in the meantime, we have the portable heaters going, and it seems to be keeping everyone comfortable.
Okay, thank you.
those other minor changes that are on this draft final budget request list, I don't see any issues with those. I'll move that we adopt those changes on that list.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye. Any abstentions? Motion passes. So now on the B fund.
Onto the B fund, relative to sales tax. Where is it here? 1120. I'm not seeing it. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm in the wrong page here. Hang on. Okay. So, just a second here. Here it is. You're anticipating 482, 447. Our actual year-to-date is 470.
Seven,
I think they have it down to 432, correct?
yeah.
Yeah, we got our year-to-date's over our anticipated, the tentative is 482, but the preliminary is 432. We're already at 470.
Yeah, so sales tax, what we decided in 2019 was we used to budget about 1 million flat.
Yes.
And then for 2019, we went up by 150,000. So 1,150,000. So the sales tax is basically spread out between the highway and the B fund. So what is not in the B fund is on the other side, it's in the DB fund. So if you combine the two together right now, it would give you a total of 1,150,000.
I see, you're apportioning whatever amount
Right.
is
Because
needed
you have
for
to-
each fund.
You have to balance the B fund first.
Okay.
And then whatever remains. goes to the
So
B fund.
you've taken the $1 million and then just broken it down based on the percentage for each one.
And
of those.
actually, it increased it to 1,150,000.
So
Okay.
depending on what we budget in the B fund, maybe we decide to increase expenditure. You will see that the 1120 changes.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Until it balances, and then the difference goes into the B.
And what's the B fund balance at this point?
We anticipate up to end of the year 4.5.
Yeah, well, okay, all right. All right, there's no, it's moved. All right,
You know, there's really no, other than CHIPS money and the odd permit fee, not a whole lot of revenue sources in the DB fund.
right, so I remember when we had this conversation a few years ago, we had to start shifting
Yeah.
to DB. Okay, my questions would be 1480.200B equipment. I'm not sure what that is, but there's a $42,000 expense. It's 1480.200B.
I think that's the one we just mentioned about,
Oh, that's the cable equipment.
the equipment for the,
Okay, all right, so we're gonna get that back. It was, I saw it was put out there on a line I didn't recognize. All right, so that money's coming back when we get a check from whoever.
As soon as the Public Service Commission approves it.
All right, so
But that's all work in progress.
that'll be fine. All right, then, all right, let's go to town patrol then, and let's just talk this out real quick. 3120.2. 3120.2 is town vandalism patrol. 3120.1 is the stipend for the sergeant, that's fine. 3120.200 is an equipment line that was, I think we used it to buy the police cars, right?
yeah.
Are the cars have the MDTs, everything's in it, right? We don't need to buy any more equipment for the police cars at this point? I believe everyth's in there.
As far as I know.
Okay.
And are we getting grant funding for that, or was that?
Well, years ago, Sergeant Begor had gotten a portion of grant funding, but then we had to replace the cars, so, I don't know if it ever worked out. All right, so then, right now, we had a discussion at the preliminary budget hearing regarding making an adjustment to the town patrol contractual amount, which is 3120.400. Now, it used to be around 150,000, then we got it up to 188 back in 2017. We added $12,000 for targeted traffic enforcement in 2016. That brought it to 200,000. I was trying to keep this in the ballpark of 200,000. I do see that the supervisor's recommendation is to increase the funding, and I'll be willing to listen.
Because we're running at that run rate right now, as we've increased more for stationary patrols at the request of residents, as we've, increased more monitoring of parks because of drug paraphernalia and other activities there. I think right now, they're at around 188,000, without, the remainder of the year, and I think 1 or 2 months billed. They've been doing a really good job, and we are seeing, increases in, the speeding, cutting down, and other, fines and revenues. So I know that the sergeant has been doing a good job of managing it, and seeing that our residents are happier with that bill.
One thing that I would caution is that with the bail reform and some of the other changes that have made, that might adversely, there might be some increased costs associated on the labor side.
Yeah, the problem is our forfeiture bail comes into A fund as revenue, and our expense for this is on the B side.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, so that's a challenge, but there's gonna be a need for warrant task force,
So, yeah, exactly. But I mean, that's not gonna be,
I'm hoping
that'll be accounting.
I'm hoping the county pays for that.
Yeah, this evening we were talking about that. That's why it's a little bit late, that they're looking at county and some state help, but also they're looking at those towns with, dedicated police, services where their costs are rising. Where we're not seeing that tremendous rise because it's being spread out through the sheriff. So I think that we're getting that benefit again, Bill, where we're not going to see that significant cost that others have. I think East Fishkill is budgeting a lot more. Because
I think you're going to see a lot of overtime expenses.
Yeah, a lot of overtime.
I think what we need to do in 2020 is have the conversation again regarding paying deputy sheriffs on overtime to patrol the town versus having the county hire 2 deputies that are working full-time in the town of Wappinger. I discussed this with the undersheriff a few days ago. Once you get above the 200,000 mark, that's where you got to start looking at, okay, does it make more sense to have 2 dedicated deputies? Right. Yes, there's going to be backfill. We understand that. You may not be able to cover it full-time the entire year because there's time off and things like that. But if you can put 2 deputies on 40 hours a week for $200,000.
Yeah, and the undersheriff is interested in that actually in connection with the other matter that we're talking about as to the possible acquisition facility. They're also interested and more willing to work with us too if we were to dedicate some space, such as in that separate house or something, to them to have a substation. And then it would make sense for a home for 2 full-time people. Is, again, something that we'll talk about.
All right, so right now we're seeing about a $30,000 increase collectively on that line.
And I think for the work that they've been doing, it's actually well paying off.
Yeah, we've got those 2 areas in the 3rd Ward, and I constantly am in contact, and he said to remind us during budget season,
Right.
our funds will run out quickly if we keep having these specific targeted areas.
Correct.
All right, so I'll support this based on what we just talked about. I think we do need to explore other options. You know, if we can get 2 deputies at 40 hours a week that are assigned to the town of Wappinger, that are the same officers, you know, I think that there's value there from a community policing standpoint. All right, I have no problem with that now. Okay.
Keep talking, I just need to go look. I'll be right back.
Help me with something, line 3410199B. We adopted 5,000, is that correct?
Which line was that?
3410.199B. Comp time after hours fire calls.
Yes.
So we adopted 5,000, right?
Yes.
Correct.
Actual year-to-date is 1,000?
Yeah. Actually, look at his salary, which is 2 lines up, and you'll see the actual, it's a part-time position, so being that it's a part-time position, I don't think you're gonna see a lot of comp time use because he's just gonna get paid hourly for whatever hours it comes out.
Okay.
So that's up to 5,000, it doesn't mean we're spending it. In previous years, when we had a full-timer in that position, we had to really be careful because that every single dollar was spent. But right now, that's a bargain, what we're looking at. So, the supervisor's back in the room. I just had a question relative to line 3620.109B. 3620.109B, we had discussed exploring in 2019 of creating a position to be a department head for code enforcement. We were not in a position in 2019 to entertain that. That said, I'm not so sure that we shouldn't be in a position to discuss that further in 2020. Any thoughts?
You know, there's a couple thoughts I'd like to, because it relates to individuals, discuss in executive session, Bill, then we come back to it.
Sure. Very good. All right. Okay. All right, so I think I might have brought this up last time. Let me just double check, because we may have already had this conversation. It had to do with counselors, Jessica, I think we talked about
You
this.
reduced it by 10.
7310-103B, 7310-103, okay, yeah, we did. All right. All right, then, okay, I had a question about 8015.101B, 8015.101B, zoning department deputy. I see the position in here for 40,000. Deputy zoning administrator, is that what this is?
Let's see.
Yeah, I think
Yes.
what she was trying to say was that for the cycle continuity, because we need to have somebody here that can be trained just in case she decides that it's time for her to leave.
She's not using the R word yet, is she?
Well, depends on,
Can't afford to lose her.
In the past, wasn't the zoning secretary trained?
Well,
In
I
the
think,
past, the past couple of years?
well, I think what she's looking for is somebody to actually do zoning enforcement.
Right.
But wasn't in the past, wasn't Barbara the secretary, and then she helped, I can't
I
think
think
of her
B-
name right now.
Barbara was, yeah, she,
Right, and that's how we've done it in the past, why would we, what's the benefit of not continuing that?
Well-
Besides spending the 20K?
Well, the secretary, who is the secretary for
B.
zoning right now?
B.
Is it B?
Yeah,
Yes.
and Barbara was the secretary before, so why, I don't understand why we would,
Well, B
Do
doesn't,
this.
I don't think B's certified as a code enforcement officer, though.
well, maybe we should change that.
Well, then, if B were to get certified as a code enforcement officer, she'd have to take the test and then place on the test in order to be.
Is that what Barbara had to do before?
Well, back in those days,
I
I
believe
yeah, I mean,
Barbara
the
did
zone-
take
zone-
the-
zoning
did.
administrator is a
Okay,
civil
so-
service.
She had to do that.
Give that
Listen,
option rather than, I think, then, or hold off on this until
I mean,
2020.
deputy zoning administrator would be a civil service position as well,
she'd have to hire off a list.
unless you're picking a part-time.
And that's what I think this is, isn't it? 50%?
No, I think the 40% is the first, beginning,
Yeah.
Sorry.
full-time position. I mean, the question is, do we want to, add a
Can we
person?
just, like, maybe put this off to next year and see how things pan out? Please?
From what we're seeing, Bill, there is a need right now. That window is really booked. Of course, we're short one person because, he was hired away to Poughkeepsie a significantly greater salary. Yeah, but the window, I think right now, the inspections are about 2 to 3 weeks, out into the future,
Well,
because
I
there's
mean-
so many activities.
The other issue is, as Bill points out, this position is a zoning deputy, which is not a code enforcement position.
Correct.
So, the other option is to cross-train one of the code enforcement people to do zoning work as well. I mean, that's the other option, but.
But I think related to another issue or two that we talked about, let me explain it a little bit more.
Okay, we can go
Okay,
back.
we'll come back, we'll revisit this, and, I don't necessarily disagree with what Angela was saying too on that position.
Thank you.
8020.412B is an escrow line.
I'm sorry, repeat the 401B?
8020.412B.
Oh, 412B, okay.
Posted?
I'm just not sure what that is. It shows 28180 as a year-to-date, but there's nothing. Escrow write-off, it says on the other one.
Well,
That's a one-time charge.
Okay. All right, so that's not going to affect next year.
That's the big can that came down the road.
Great. All right, I have nothing else in B. We can jump into DB real quick unless somebody has something else in B. All right, oh, great, now I'm losing pages, hold on. Over to the DB.
So, Bill, maybe just for purposes of the audience, as we have a lot more people paying attention to it, you explain what the DB is,
So the DB.
how it relates to.
The DB would be the highway department outside the Village of Wabenders Falls. Since the Village of Wabenders Falls has their own highway department, the folks that live in the village pay for their highway department. The people that live in the town of Wabender outside the Village of Wabenders Falls pay for our highway department. And this way, nobody's paying theoretically for two services. Although, I could make the argument that it makes no sense that those that live in the Village of Wabenders Falls are paying the salaries of our highway superintendent, but that's just the way the law is. I don't know why.
So
And that's why it's
I
divided
think
A
that's
A
why,
and B.
Right, but-
technically, there's also a DA fund, which we would have expenditures in if the town maintained any bridges. But since we do not maintain any bridges, there is no expenditures in the DA fund. All the bridges that are in the town
County,
are
state.
maintained by either the county or New York State.
And that's why we have an A and B, because obviously we have a village and a town.
Right.
And the services are divided in some respects between the
Right.
two.
Although, if you dig deep into it, some of it doesn't make sense, right?
Well,
Right.
A lot of things
Because
we're finding
technically,
out doesn't make sense.
technically, folks living in the village shouldn't have to pay the salary of the town highway superintendent.
well, in any event,
But that's the law. We looked into
Yeah.
this. We challenged it,
Yeah.
and they said, this is the
Exactly.
way it's been since the king,
yeah.
so.
But that's
we're
how
gonna
it's
do it.
generally structured, why A and B are separated.
Anyway, it only affects
You know,
people,
some of these things that
That's so
have been
archaic.
like that need to be addressed and changed.
it's the state law.
No, I understand, but it still
wish, I agree.
isn't
I
great.
wish.
Yeah, we agree.
This is not our money, it's the taxpayers' money, even in the state.
So when we get into the DB fund, we're looking at town highway, right? And the only stuff that I was looking at here, we might have already talked about, 5110.100 DB, okay? This is something that we look at each year. 5110.100 DB is the personal services line for the highway department. And I always, each year, ask the same question, how many people are being funded by that line? And is it remaining the same in 2020?
Is it 18, Frederick? 17 or 18? What's the number that you
Just
have?
confirm, because I have the.
And as far as I know, yes, it's, well.
It's
yeah,
the same,
there's-
it's the same
So-
amount.
There's a couple of issues here, because on that line, the mechanics are not in that line.
Correct. I'm talking about just the line,
Oh, that's right, so
highway.
no, it's not 17 or 18, it would be a couple less.
So the mechanics would
That's right.
not be in that line. Also, the annual salary would also be split between that line and is there a separate line for snow removal?
Yeah, there's
So
separate.
that is usually overtime, but yeah, there's a separate line, yep.
Because also the snow, so, but but because of the way the highway budget is,
Right.
by statute, there's 4 components of the highway budget. There's spending on bridges, spending on road repairs, equipment,
Weeds.
and brush and weeds.
Yeah.
So those are the 4 components.
So just the bare bones 5110 line, do you know how many people that,
Yeah, it should be 15. Currently,
15?
we have 15
Yeah, that's about
regular
right,
plus
after
2
with the 2
mechanics.
mechanics.
Right.
okay, so 15 is the number.
Yeah, and the secretary's obviously
Yeah, yeah,
here
yeah.
with the highway
Sec-
superintendent.
Secretary is an
Yeah,
A.
exactly, that's what I said, yeah.
Okay.
That's why I
Deputy super,
separated some.
so out of the A fund would be the highway super, deputy highway super, and the secretary.
Yeah.
All right. I think we discussed previously about making some minor changes, which I think are reflected here. 5110.405 DB was a blacktop line we had a discussion about. I had recommended we reduce it by 10,000 to 40,000 because theoretically this is pothole blacktop, correct? Yes.
Correct, it's plotted.
Yeah. 5132.4 DB, gas diesel, I discussed about reducing that slightly based on historic. Let me just make sure I got the right number here. Hold on, 5132.4. Yes, we reduce it from 90,000 to 75,000 based on the historic spending. Brush and weeds contractual line, 5140.400. We decreased by 10,000 to 15,000. I just want to make sure it's there. 51.4. Yes, we did. Okay. And then the conversation that we put on hold was 5142.400 DB. It's contractual line for salt. My discussion had to do with trying to show an effort of reduction. We're at 385 right now. My recommendation was to reduce it to 350.
And I discussed it with the highway superintendent elected, he agreed that that could be the amount.
He agreed what?
350.
Oh, okay, so then I'll move we reduce the line by 35,000 to 350.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Nays or abstentions, motion passed.
All right, very good. And if we need, like I said,
If we need to move.
We'll move money.
Move it.
that's all I have.
Now,
Because I think it's going to be contingent, Bill, on what the winter's like.
Yeah.
so in addition to that, when we met with him, he said that they would like to reduce some 2 other lines.
Which lines?
The first line is line 5130.401, rental equipment. He says he could reduce it from 25,000 to 20,000.
I'm sorry, which line?
5130.401, machinery equipment rental.
The rental?
Down to,
Yes.
so he wants to reduce it by 5,000 to
By
20,000?
5,000 to
Frederick and I had
25,000.
talked with him, same discussion.
All right, I'll move that we reduce it by 5,000.
I'll second it.
And the last one he wanted to reduce is the one above it, 5130.200 equipment from 22,000 to 20,000.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll move that we reduce it to 20,000.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
What's the 940, 414 in the actual? Or, oh, that was the department. Okay, correction. All right, that was reduced, forget it. Okay.
Right.
We had that conversation.
So should we move to go into executive session then?
Before we go to executive, can we just see where we stand right now with the numbers?
Yeah, I don't know if it's bothering me there. Yeah. I'm speaking of propane or something. My eyes are really sore.
Mine are burning.
Yeah, see here. Hey, Steve? I'm sorry. Is there something to do with the adjustment or whatever? My eyes and Angela's eyes are really burning. You know?
They work indirect, it's indirect heat, so it really shouldn't be getting any exhaust fumes in here.
Okay.
Probably just from looking at all these numbers.
No, it's really, you know,
We were able to
It's an
reduce the
actual-
fund balance appropriation further by about 20,000. So from 497 to 477, and we're at exactly 2% tax levy increase.
All right, what's the tax rate gonna be? Plus or minus?
The tax rate for the townwide is 1.93, so that's the same as.
$1.93, the same as last time.
And the village rate is 0.83,
All right, slight
Slight.
increase there.
yeah.
The village is E3.
It was-
0.83, yes.
It was 77 last year. So we still don't know where the chargeback is. Is there a way we can pay the chargeback ahead out of fund balance prior to December 31st so that we know the tax rate's going to stay at $1.93?
Yes, we could do that.
All right, so what I would say is discuss that with the supervisor and see if it makes sense. Because what happens is supervisor, we'll sit here, we'll have this conversation, we'll
I
say the
know.
tax rate's $1.93 and then it'll be $1.95 on their tax bill because they charge back. If we have fund balance, if we have cash on hand, my recommendation is we pay the charge back in cash before December 31st, and then we know the tax rate is going to be the same.
What was the chargeback last year, do you know?
I think it was between 35 to 40,000.
It was like it was like a penny or two.
Yeah.
But the point is, when you get your tax bill and it shows you your plus and minus, it's looking at tax rates.
Are we still getting charged back the Board of Elections stuff?
No, that's zeroed out. We shouldn't be getting charged. We're not getting charged for elections.
So the chargeback for 2019 was $35,087.
It's nominal, but it's more of a matter of principle.
Yeah, no,
Because then when they,
screws everything up.
you tell everybody, oh, we got the tax rate the same, and then they get their tax bill. And so that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, and what's interesting though, then on the charts, it still shows the 193 or the one,
Right.
the original one that's passed by the budget. But
'Cause that's-
where the confusion lies. is what
Correct,
you're
because
talking
they
about.
have
I
to
agree.
recoup
Yeah.
the administrative
Right,
fee.
right.
So I'm good for now to go to executive session.
I'll make that motion, go into executive session, personnel.
Is there a second?
You guys want to talk recycle center at all?
No, not right now. Yeah.
Charge, so is keeping the charges the same for the?
Right now, we're gonna revisit it,
When it's paid or-
No,
I would say post January 1st.
post-January
Yeah.
1st.
So then we start selling them in 3 weeks, mid-December. So once you start selling them, I can't change the price because then people come back for rebates. So at the executive session, you want to just quickly review the charges for this coming year and then we're ready to go for next year.
Okay. We can
Yeah,
discuss
right.
it.
I gotta leave it the same, because we can't start giving rebates to people.
I would say status quo right now, and I understand that we can't make changes after you start issuing these, but I don't think we're in a position to rewrite the rules at this moment.
Well, I mean, I have a spreadsheet here with different charges for each item. You wanna just raise some or lower some, it's right there, we can do it real simple, it's just a matter.
I would say we could touch base in executive session and then decide where we're gonna go.
Yes, okay, we had a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any nays or abstentions? Motion passes.